Thank you for tuning in to Shared Hope International's Invading the Darkness, an anti-sex trafficking podcast. We want to acknowledge that the content we discuss can be emotionally challenging and may evoke strong reactions. The stories we share often involve tough subjects related to suffering caused by sex trafficking, which may be difficult for some listeners to hear. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to Season 3 of Invading the Darkness, where we amplify survivor voices and fight for justice. I'm Yvonne, a survivor of sex trafficking, using my voice to break the silence and spark change. Today, we have an honored guest speaker, Odessa. Hi, Odessa.
Hi, how are you guys?
We're good. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your voice as part of the Just Like Me campaign. Before we start, I want to remind you that you are in control of the conversation. If anything feels too much, we can pause or skip a question. This is your story, and you share what feels right for you. Does that sound good?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
All right. Well, Odessa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like where you're from, what life looked like before your trafficking experience?
Well, I was born in Hawthorne, California, but I'm from Bakersfield. You know how they say if you done lived here over a certain amount of years, you're from here. So I've been here quite a long time. So I'm from Bakersfield. What my trafficking looked like, what it looked like before, I honestly can't say there has ever been a before. So my mom had me when she was 16, but at the time when she was pregnant with me, she was on drugs. And she lived with my grandmother, who in turn, after I was born, was murdered when I was 3 years old. And prior to all of that, prior to me being born, there was a family member that propositioned my mom and my grandmother to abort me because they didn't need, as in her words, a nappy head child ruining their lives.
Right.
Which didn't happen, obviously, because I am here.
Yeah.
But I would say, honestly, I remember my grandma before she passed away. I remember, just little things I remember about her. I remember, of course, eating out of her plate. I'm her first granddaughter. So I remember eating out of her plate. I remember playing cowboys and Indians in her yard, those types of things. But then she was abruptly taken away from us, like I said, when I was 3. My mom is the one who had to identify her body when she was murdered. So I would say that is where our generational curses honestly started. My mom ended up being with a person who was not a good person, but portrayed to be a good person because he was a military vet. But he was a sexual predator. He was a widow who had his 2 daughters living with him that he was molesting. And so just life was honestly, I would say, never really good. Went through a lot of things. I was in the foster system, and I know we're going to get into all of that stuff, but prior to, there honestly was nothing really ever good.
Right. Okay, well, I know that familial trafficking isn't something that's often talked about. Would you be comfortable sharing what that looked like for you?
Familial trafficking is when a family member is the person who actually traffics you. It can be a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, a cousin, anybody that is in your family. So my mom is my actual trafficker. That's where it started. She was a prostitute. She was also selling herself for drugs because she had a serious drug problem. So she was selling herself for drugs. And then one day she came to me saying, it's time for you to help the family. Well, let me back up. Before that, as she was bringing the different uncles into our home, they started seeing that I was developing and they started asking for me. And she decided to start giving me to them so she could feed her drug habit. Um, in that, we were in the foster system. We were wards of the court. We were latchkey kids. We didn't go to school on the 1st and the 15th because we were on welfare and different things like that. Then there was one day that she finally told me, she said, it's time for you to start earning your keep.
Mhm.
So she advised me that I would need to help the family was her words, help the family. So she took me in the house, had me take a shower and all of that. And then when I took that shower, she put some perfume on me and we walked down the street to the corner store. And that corner store had an alleyway. And that's where some drug dealers met her and they paid her in drugs, and that's how my trafficking began with my mom doing that. And then those guys continued to traffic me, the gang members and the drug dealers and all of that type of stuff.
Yeah. So many survivors, especially minors, are arrested and charged for crimes they were forced to commit while being trafficked. Was this part of your experience?
I was arrested a couple times, but I was arrested for theft
Hmm.
because my mom had me going. She would sell our food stamps. So she had me going to the store to buy food, well, not buy food, but to get food for
Yeah.
my brothers and sisters who were coming up under me. There's 7 of us total. I'm the oldest, so I was the one had to be responsible to make sure my younger brothers and sisters ate. So I got caught stealing a couple of times from the grocery stores. And then she would also have me go to the local malls, and the drug dealers and gangbangers' girlfriends would pick out clothing. And when they picked out those clothing, it was up to me to get the clothing. And when I would get the clothing, I would bring it back to my mom. She would see how much everything was, see what she could get in drugs for what I had stolen. So I was in juvenile hall, and then I went to jail a couple of times due to stealing clothing and due to stealing the food and different things like that.
So how did the legal system treat you? Were you seen as a victim or criminalized? I know you talked that you did some time on that, but how did they really treat you?
I was treated like I was a bad kid.
Yeah.
Not one person ever asked had
Mm.
I been a victim of domestic violence, had I been a victim of sexual assault, had I been a victim of trafficking. I think I'm 53, so I think back then it was more, okay, she's just a problem child. Mom's on drugs. We're going to take the kids away. Mom takes these classes and then you can go back home. They human trafficking, I honestly believe back then was a word you didn't say, was a thing that was non-existent. So nobody ever asked. I was considered honestly a problem child, a ward of the court, a at-risk youth.
Looking back, what should have been done differently to support you instead of punishing you?
They should have asked me what was going on. Why was I doing the things I was doing? Even I can honestly say even in the school system, I was getting in trouble. I was pulling fire alarms. I was having fights all the time. I was having outbursts. I didn't care. I came to school sometimes with dirty clothes on or with hand-me-down clothes on, and not one teacher ever asked anything. Not one. So what they should have done was asked, why are you getting in trouble? Why are you doing the things you're doing? Why are you acting out? Maybe if someone would have asked one question, I probably as a young child would have spilled my guts and I wouldn't have been in the situation I was in for as long as I was in it to experience all the trauma that I actually experienced.
Well, how did those experiences affect your healing and future opportunities?
Well, I was growing up, I can remember growing up like the trafficking stuff didn't stop, the stealing didn't stop. The system didn't stop until I was 18. But then as I turned 18, you get put out. Even in the system, you get put out. There is nothing after, there was nothing back then after 18 for a person. So you better figure it out. So because I had nowhere to go, I met a guy while I was still in high school, as a senior, and what I thought was love, fell in love. He was actually, that's where the domestic violence comes in with me. But I was like, okay, I love this person. I love him, not knowing honestly what love was or is.
Survival is one thing, but becoming an overcomer is another. What helped you start reclaiming your life and healing?
After I left him, because I think my final straw was when he hit me so hard because I wouldn't give him money one day after I had got my welfare. He hit me. I ran into the bathroom because I didn't want to give my money anymore. So I ran into the bathroom of our apartment. He busted through the door and he hit me so hard that I flew back into the shower. He blacked my eye, bloodied my lip, and I was just a mess. And so I remember grabbing a knife. I didn't want to hurt him still. I grabbed a knife, I swung it at him, and I took off running. And I called the police that day. And I was finally done with him. But that was 11 years later. So after I finally truly left, I decided to go to school because I had been told in my younger age that I would be nothing more than a mattress for men to lay on. And you believe that after it's told to you for so long, you believe that after your body has been ravaged so many times, you believe that after nobody has ever truly loved you. So I believed it. But I decided, like, okay, if I go to school and I get these degrees, I won't be a mattress. So I went and got my AA, but I still was a mattress. Then I went and got my BA, but I was like, okay, I still can't get a job because I really don't have anything. And who's going to want me? So I still felt that mattress mentality. Then I continued on and got higher education. I have 3 master's degrees, but it took counseling. In that last master's degree, they required us to do counseling because I went for educational counseling. And so what the instructor told us that day was, how can you counsel anybody if you have your own mess? So in that quarter, we had to do 10 sessions of counseling. And in those 10 sessions, I ended up going for a year and a half. And that's where my breakthrough came. And that's when I knew I finally deserved more and I finally deserved better. And that's where the healing started. That's when I started writing the books. That's when I started doing all these other things and becoming an advocate and, all of the great things that are going on now in my life. But it took a long time. Healing does not happen overnight. It definitely requires counseling, and there's nothing wrong with counseling. I know they say us as women, we are strong, and we are. But if you've been through trauma, counseling will help you get to that next step in your life because it honestly is your brain has to be rewired. Your thoughts have to be rewired because you've been through so much for so long that your thought is always survival. And you can't flourish if you're always in survival mode.
Why do you think campaigns like the Just Like Me campaign are important in changing how society sees survivors?
Because human trafficking is a hush hush thing. And I honestly believe that people are, if I don't talk about it, it won't come my way. If we don't acknowledge it, it won't be in our city. Trafficking is everywhere. And it's honestly been everywhere since the beginning of time. And a campaign like this to shed light on it, to provide awareness, to try to provide prevention, to get that prosecution is very vital and very important because as a survivor, you don't believe that you have a voice. But campaigns like this give you that voice. Campaigns like this give you that voice for the voiceless. So that's what this campaign is doing. It is helping our voiceless victims become victors.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, what I want lawmakers to understand is that when you put a child in the system, ask the questions. Don't just ask, well, did parent beat you or did caregiver beat you or whatever? Ask all the questions because that child could be a victim. That child could have been a victim of so many different things, but because you took that child away from the family, you think it's just this. It's and stop just automatically because a parent does the classes that you reunify them with that parent without finding out the underlying situations. Learn to ask the right questions. And that is another reason the JUST program is so important because we have to get people aware and understand all the different forms of trafficking so they can ask all the right questions.
Well, how can people support survivors like you beyond just listening to stories?
Bring us to the table as an expert, not as just a storyteller. Our stories matter. Our stories, every single time we retell a story, it is traumatizing. And we as survivors have to do something after every single time we tell our story for self-care because sometimes it draws back up things. I can tell my story. I'm sitting here talking to you about this right now and I'm good. But I just spoke a week ago and I broke down. So it can trigger us at any time. Be cognizant of the questions that you ask us. And when you do ask us, understand how you ask. Make sure you use the right wording. We weren't prostitutes. Please don't use prostitute. We were victims. And we are now victors. We are survivors. We are lived experience experts. So treat us as such.
Odessa, your courage and resilience is so inspiring. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
trusting us with your story today. And before we wrap up, is there anything else on your heart that you would like to share?
Support survivors. Support survivors. I know so many survivors coming to the JUST conference, seeing all the survivors there, seeing all the different advocates there, seeing all the resources there. There are survivors who are doing big things in the community. They have books, they've become authors, they have businesses that do the different things. They have homes that are helping survivors. They do all these different things. We are not just pretty faces because we are beautiful. So we are not just pretty faces. We have businesses and it takes money and it takes resources and it takes a community to help us continue. When you ask us to come and speak, you're taken away from our daily job. So compensate us, bring us to the table. If you want to put something in your organization that has to do with trafficking, you want to train your people on trafficking because it's in every business that there is. You have to contribute and treat us like employees as well. We deserve for our expertise to be paid.
I appreciate you so much, Odessa. We are standing with you, and your voice matters in making real change. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Odessa's story highlights something heartbreaking. So many minors are not only trafficked, but also criminalized for their own exploitation. Instead of being seen as victims, they are punished. But here's something people often overlook. Trafficking wouldn't exist without demand, without buyers. Just isn't an issue about those who are exploited. It's about those who create the demand in the first place. Survivors from all backgrounds have been manipulated, exploited, and when they tried to escape, they were the ones arrested. It's not just a girl's issue or a boy's issue, it's a demand issue. The focus needs to be on those who buy and exploit children, not on the children themselves. That's why we have to change the system, not just to free survivors, but to hold buyers accountable and stop this cycle at its source. You can be part of the solution. Help us stop the unjust incarceration of survivors by contacting your legislators today. It's simple. Text Shared Hope to 52886 or visit the link in the episode description to take action now. Thank you for listening, for standing with survivors, and for being a voice for justice. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep fighting for change. Again, text Shared Hope to 52886.